Learning how to cook pinto beans is easy. There's nothing like a big pot of southern style pinto beans with ham hocks, so I want to show you how to make it at home. I'm using 1 pound of dried pinto beans. I soaked them for 6 hours. All I did is I just put them in that pot and I added enough room temperature water to cover them with maybe an inch of water. A couple hours later, I came back and the beans swelled up a lot because they had absorbed a lot of the water. So I added a bit more, and as you can see, they've continued to absorb the water. I did not soak them overnight because I forgot. You could do a quick soak with some hot water. If you don't soak them, they'll take longer to cook, but honestly, I think you will be fine. And of course, because I'm making a southern style recipe, I'm using some smoked meat. In this case, a ham hock. I'm using around a pound of ham hock. What I did is I boiled it in some homemade vegetable stock and a bit of extra water for 1 hour on medium heat. And in my homemade vegetable stock, I of course included my secret ingredient of 2 to 3 bay leaves. The ham hock is starting to fall apart now, but it's not quite there. So instead of trying to pull apart the meat now, I'm going to continue to boil it in the beans. In order to flavor the beans even more, here I have 1 medium onion and 2 large cloves of garlic, finely chopped. I'm going to add this to the beans. Now I'm going to turn on the heat, bring the water to a boil, and once the water comes to a boil, I am going to add my beans. You could add the beans now, but I just want to give the garlic and onions a little bit of a head start. I'm going to add a little bit of extra water, but not too much, because I don't want the pot to run over when I add the beans. It's been a few minutes, and as you can see, the garlic and onions along with the ham shank have now come to a boil. Now I'm just going to turn the heat down to medium, and I'm going to add in my pinto beans. I'm trying to find the best way to do this because the tripod is in the way. Maybe I'll just do this. I'm just going to dump everything into the pot. As you can see, adding all those pinto beans really brought the liquid almost to the top of the pot. That's why I did not boil the ham hock in a lot of water. If you are going to be adding beans to ham hock stock or vegetable stock, something like that, be aware that when you add the beans, that's going to push up the level of the liquid. Now that my beans are simmering on medium heat, gas mark 3 out of 6, I'm just going to let it cook for, I'm guessing, an hour and a half, but I'll let you know. And every once in a while, maybe every 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to see if the water's going down, if I need to add more. Turn around the ham hock so all sides of it can cook. My pinto beans have been cooking for about an hour and 15 minutes. As I said I was going to do, I've just been stirring once every 15 to 20 minutes, and I flipped the ham hock once just to make sure all sides cooked. I think this is going to take another 15, maybe 20 minutes. The pinto beans themselves, they're starting to fall apart. Some of the ones that went in broken, they're getting soft. Like I said, I think 15 to maybe 20 more minutes. I have some leftover ham from ham shank that I made last week. I have half a pound, 225 grams. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to tear it apart and add that to the beans. The ham hock does definitely have some meat on it, but I think that a little bit of extra ham is really going to make this pot of beans into a full meal. I am now done cooking my pinto beans with ham hock. Just as I predicted, I boiled my pinto beans on medium heat for an hour and a half. They're at the point now where they're nice and soft, but they're not falling apart. Some of the beans that weren't whole when I started, they've broken down and they're starting to form a nice broth that's a little bit on the creamy side, but most of the beans are still whole, so I think that most southern chefs would say that this is just about right. The extra ham that I added is starting to break apart as well. The ham hock is falling apart as well. So what I'm going to do is, once it cools down a little bit, I'm going to take out the ham hock, I'm going to take off the meat and add the meat back to the pot. Although it looks like there might have been a bit too much liquid in the pot, I let the beans cook for another 10 minutes and then I turned off the heat so that they could cool down before serving. After boiling for a bit longer and then cooling down, the beans thickened up fine, so I didn't need to remove any of the liquid. I just finished taking the meat off of the ham hock. As you can see, there is quite a bit of meat because the ham hock was so big. I don't really care for the skin. I know some people do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the meat back into the pinto beans. I'll probably try to break it up a little bit with my fingers. I am going to put the bone back in because I do think that the bone could add a little more flavor, but I'm not going to add the skin. Like I said, if you like the skin and you want it to break down a little bit more, then you could definitely do that. Once I add the meat back, I am going to season my beans and then it will be time to eat. I was going to season my pinto beans with some pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, things like that. But honestly, I tasted them and I don't think it needs anything, in all honesty. You could add maybe a quarter of a teaspoon each of black pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder. Or if you like spice, maybe some crushed black pepper. But honestly, I think that the homemade vegetable stock with the bay leaf, the ham hock, and the ham shank, the ham I took off the ham shank that I made last week, I think that's enough flavor. It's nice and smoky. It's not too salty, not over anything. It's just perfect. One thing I did want to mention is that ham hocks and ham shank, those two things are usually on the salty side, so be careful. I honestly do not think this needs any salt at all, but if you do want to add some, I would keep it to a minimum. And of course, I talked about my cornbread on the side. Nothing like a good southern bowl of pinto beans. As you just saw, learning how to cook pinto beans is really easy. Although you could definitely make them vegetarian, cooking pinto beans with a ham hock as well as adding extra ham is what makes these truly delicious. Adding ham to your beans not only increases the protein content, making you feel fuller, it also adds a bit of fat to the broth, making the broth richer. The ham also adds flavor by adding smokiness, a subtle flavor in the background that goes very well with beans. One thing that I did want to mention is that even though I thought the beans were flavorful enough from the ham shank and the leftover ham, looking back, I probably could have added some extra spices. In all honesty, I think that something spicy would be really good in these pinto beans. Maybe some taco seasoning, cumin, something like that. I've never tried it, but I think that the spiciness from a Tex-Mex spice combined with the smokiness of the ham would be really delicious. Kind of a southern Tex-Mex fusion thing. You could also try adding some shredded cheddar cheese. I know I showed that in one of the photos, but honestly, I didn't think it really added that much. If you want to add something to these beans, I would add something spicy. Like I said, learning how to cook pinto beans is really easy. They're simple, quick, delicious. If you've never tried them Southern style, you definitely should. I know you'll love them just as much as I did. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.